Hi guys, and welcome to this video. Now up until now we have written good amount of Python code, but the major pattern that we followed in a code was all of the code that we just wrote was being executed sequentially in the same order. But when you consider real-life programming, there are situations where you need to execute a particular set of code only when a particular set of conditions are true. Otherwise, you execute some other code or you don't do anything. And that's what we will be learning by the end of this video. How to do that in Python using the conditional statement. But before we start with conditional statements, let's understand with an example why you would actually need them. Consider this scenario. Suppose you are arriving home from the office and you need to decide whether you want to cook your own food or order it. Now, here is where it gets interesting. You have a condition to check before making a decision. You will only cook food when you arrive on time. And if you arrive late, say at 10 p.m. or any time after that, only then you will think of ordering food from outside because it's too late for you to cook. So you have this condition on the left. And what I will do is I'll represent the same condition with a diagram on the right. Now that what I have done here basically, I have used two variables, food and arrive time. Then I'm doing a comparison using the comparison operator greater than to check whether the arrive time is greater than 10 or not. If the result of the comparison is true, then we set the value of food to order. Similarly, when it falls, we set the food to cook. Let's write the pseudocode for this condition. Now, what will be the first thing? The first thing, or the first step, is to check whether the arrive time is greater than 10. If it's true, if this is the case, only then the food should be ordered. Otherwise, the food should be cooked. And this is the same condition that we discussed before. Now that we have the pseudocode, let's see what will happen in Python code for this example. As you can see, the Python code is very similar to the pseudocode that we wrote in plain English. This simple syntax is one of the Python's strengths. But do you notice any difference between the pseudocode and this Python code? I think you might see the first difference is that we use an if statement to denote this condition that we were checking earlier. The second difference is we are using a colon after the if condition. Now, so far you haven't seen the use of colon in Python, but now onwards you will see this a lot. So basically the colon denotes the start of the if block. So you have written this if statement where you are checking a condition. When you write a colon and any line that you write after that, that line belongs to this if condition. So anytime the condition is true, whatever is written after the colon will get executed. Now there is another point of difference in the code and the pseudocode. And that is the for space of indentation that we have added. So just like the colon indicates the start of the if block, the for space indentation indicate all the statements that belong to this if block. So this combination of using a colon and the indentation in Python separates a code block. Now, if you have programming experience from other programming languages, there are other special characters that replaces for space indentation in Python. But because Python syntax is very similar and very plain and close to English, as you can see from the pseudocode and the code in Python, it's simple and more clean. And that's why we have to use these two, which are colon and the for space indentation to denote a block of code. So here is how each line of pseudocode maps to the code. First of all, our step 1, where we are seeing whether the arrive time is greater than 10 or not, is mapped to the if statement. Then we want to do food is equal to order only when this condition is true. And that statement goes to the subblock of the if statement. So notice that we are still using the colon and the for spaces. Here, finally, the last step where we want to do food is equal to cook. If this condition false, goes into the else block. And this statement is known as the if statement in Python. Now remember one thing here, that I have written statement 1 and statement 2. But you can actually write a lot of statements in this section. And similarly, a lot of statements in the else section. And this will be more clear when we do this in Python code in the next video. Now we just see how to work with a single comparison. But in real life again, there can be situations where you want to check multiple conditions and perform a separate task for each condition. Let's take an example. Suppose this is what I want to do using Python. there is a variable x and I want to print positive if the value of x is greater than 0. I want to print 0 if it's actually 0, and I want to print negative if x is less than 0. Now, as you can notice, there are actually 3 different conditions, and we want to do 3 different things when each of the condition is true. In this case, we work with another variation of if, known as the if, elif, and else statement. Let's see the pseudocode for this condition. If x is greater than 0, then print positive. Check if x equal to 0, then print 0. For every other situation, just print negative. So 3 conditions, 3 sentences. And this is how the code looks like on the right hand side. Now notice the interesting part. So the only thing that has changed here is the elif statement. So we already know how to work with the if and the else statement. If the comparison is true, then if statement executes. If the comparison is false, then the statements in the else block gets executed. But if you want to check multiple conditions in between, you can actually use an elif statement. And this statement again works like an if statement. It checks a condition. If this condition is true, then it executes this thing. Otherwise, it is also like if statement and goes to the else block. So a simple flow of control happens like this. First of all, your if condition is checked, and if it's true, we do this. Otherwise, we go to the next condition, which is in the elif. Then finally, if both of these conditions are not true, only then we go to the else. So if you remember our pseudocode, for every other situation, we want to just print negative. And that's what the else block denotes. So this is the general syntax of the elif statement. Now the example that we took in this video actually showed only 3 conditions. Suppose you have a lot of conditions like 99 conditions. In that case, the if condition will be the first condition. After that, you will have multiple elif statements, which each of their conditions and each of the statements that you want to execute when those conditions are true. And finally, when all of this is not true, only then the else condition will be executed. So this is how your syntax will be. And in short, in this video, we learned a great deal about conditional statements. And in the next video, we will reinforce these concepts. Thank you.